Great, I think we are about ready to get started. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. My name is Sharon Odutunde. I am Head of Partnerships in the R&D team at RSSB. Today I am wearing my UKRRIN hat and I'll be hosting our webinar. So before we kick off, just some quick housekeeping rules. If you could all please keep your cameras off unless you are a presenter, and also keep your microphone on mute, that would be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, we do have a chat functionality that I think a few people have started using already in Microsoft Teams. So if you have any questions when any of the presenters are speaking, please just drop them in there and we'll get to them towards the end of the session. And if you have anything that you want to say in the interactive session, you can raise your hand using the little hand functionality. So our webinar today is being recorded, as you have been notified in the chat. The slides will all be available after the event, and in your joining instructions you received a login for a site called Mural, which we'll be using for the interactive workshop. And please join us on social media and get in touch in any other ways. I think we're using hashtag UKRRINPassengerX for this particular event. So just as a bit of a background to today's webinar, we've been on a bit of a journey as UKRRIN, starting earlier last year, where we identified as a network that we could do more in the space of passenger experience and focus on research that can really support the development of services that can make the railway easy to use for all passengers and can truly be called inclusive. Since then, we've been working on developing this idea and looking at how to develop key capabilities in this area. And we actually hosted a workshop in November last year where we started sharing our initial ideas and gathering feedback from industry. We've been able to use that feedback to develop a high-level plan and vision that we are very keen to share with you today. And we're hoping to use your feedback to shape that vision to make sure that it meets industry needs and also identify partners that we can work on to make this vision a reality in the future. So on to our agenda for today. We're going to kick off with a brief introduction to UKRRIN and its value to industry. And then we have a presentation on innovation at HS2. And next we'll have a presentation on our ideas for an inclusive passenger experience centre. And then we'll move on to get your feedback via an interactive workshop and look at some next steps. So now I'd like to hand over to Clive Roberts from the University of Birmingham. He's Head of School and Director of BCRRE, and he'll talk to you about the value of UKRRIN. So Clive, would you like to take control of the slides and turn your camera on? And then you'll be able to present.
Thanks, Sharon. So thank you very much for the introduction, Sharon. And as you say, I'm Clive Roberts from the University of Birmingham, and I am the academic lead for the UKRRIN activity. And what I want to tell you about over the next couple of slides is how we use UKRRIN, the UK Rail Research and Innovation Network, where it comes from and what it does. So UKRRIN, the UK Rail Research and Innovation Network, was formed 2 years ago in 2018 and is a collaboration between academia and industry with the view of how we create a step change in innovation. And really that take up of innovation, the work that we do in universities and getting it out into industry. It's funding 4 centres of excellence, a Centre of Excellence in Digital Systems, which is at the University of Birmingham, so my home institution, a Centre of Excellence in Rolling Stock at Huddersfield University, which has partners also from Newcastle and Loughborough University, a Centre of Excellence in Infrastructure, which is at Southampton University with partners at Nottingham, Loughborough, also with partners at
Heriot Watt.
Heriot Watt, good example, and also Sheffield. So we have 3 academic centres of excellence and then a 4th centre of excellence, which is the Centre of Excellence in Test. And what we're talking about here today is whether we might create a 5th centre of excellence, which focuses on passenger experience and how we deal with customers. So currently we have 12 academic members to our consortium and 17 industrial partners. Some of the partners here today are members of UKRRIN. Some are not, and we are very much an open relationship, and the idea is to expand the network so we can invite more academic and more industrial partners to work with us. And we also have developed a number of relationships with SMEs so that a whole supply chain is supported, and this very much features as part of the rail sector deal activity. So, as I said, there are a number of centres of excellence that work together already, and those centres of excellence are in somewhat the conventional areas. And what we are clustered around is the coordinating hub, which is RSSB, and how they help us facilitate, for example, events like today, and also enable knowledge transfer between those different networks. So we have an existing strong foundation of industrial partners that are our members. The slide shows both the founding partners as well as those partners that have joined since UKRRIN has come to fruition. It's interesting to show that, for example, SMRT are a partner, so that's Singapore Metro. So we're not constrained just to UK organisations and UK railways. All of the organisations you see on the slide here are private organisations. We have separate agreements and membership with HS2, with Network Rail, with Transport for London. And what we are intending to do and think about in terms of going forward is addressing the industry challenges that perhaps aren't covered directly from our existing activities. So we already do work around how we might undertake traffic management and signalling and control from an operations point of view, but not really in the way of how we actually then relay that information to passengers, how we link that with other transport modes. We don't really think around the accessible travel for all. We talk about sharing data and develop, for example, a data platform to share amongst UKRRIN researchers, but we're not really looking at how we can use that digital information with customers and the wider general public and organisations. Similarly, in terms of wayfinding, the advancements in ticketing that we might be able to bring about. We do some work on ride quality, but much more on passenger safety on the trains and how they feel, and also equally overcrowding. Again, we're very interested in the operations of trains currently, and we touch on overcrowding and how we might manage it, but there's a number of challenges here that we're not currently addressing. So there are a number of things that we're trying to do as we go forward. We're trying to look at the further capabilities that we need to require within UKRRIN to address industry challenges. We want to look at how we might extend centres of excellence and put more capability in there. Looking at how we might broaden and deepen relationships with our existing partners as well as a set of broader partners. And also looking at how we might be able to generate a greater network, a greater sum of the parts from what we have already. And now I can pass over to Howard to say a little bit more about how this applies from an HS2 perspective.
Hi, thanks, Clive. Can everybody hear me okay? Good.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I'll get going on this because I've only got 10 minutes and I've got a lot of ground to cover. So what I've been asked to do is explain today why passenger experience and more importantly an inclusive passenger experience is such an important part of the HS2 program, even though we actually will not be the operator of the train, and that's something that our partner, the West Coast partner, will be doing. However, as we are now in the stages of starting the construction of phase 1 and later stages of planning for phase 2, this is a really genuinely unique experience, opportunity to put passenger experience at the heart of that journey, and to put that into context of scale. That's 345 miles of new high-speed track connecting London to the north of England with the direct high-speed track, but then also all of the subsequent services. So what's very important to us is not only the passenger experience for the trains in which we are directly interfacing with, but all of those other trains and the passenger journey from start to finish. The railway itself will be serving around 30 million people, and of which we want as many people in that that area to be able to use and very easily travel with us on HS2. And we're working very, very closely with the West Coast partner to make that a seamless journey from the plan of the travel all the way through to the arrival of the destination. We'll be serving about 100 existing railway stations, and there are plans to put brand new largest railway stations in the UK being built, and some of them have even sort of broken ground now. So what we're talking about here is a very significant change to the rail landscape within the UK, impacting a huge number of passengers, and we need to create a multimodal interface to all of the existing rail systems so that it is an inclusive passenger experience all the way through. And even if people are not traveling directly on HS2, the impact of HS2 will affect their journeys on other services, meaning that there is more capacity on existing rail or road networks. We will be taking cars off the road because people will have more flexible and appropriate transportation options going forward. And then also there's all those people that live along the route that will also have us as a neighbour, and that's something that we also take very seriously, and we are continuing to work with them, but it will expand those towns which we serve. So if I move on to my next slide, aware of the time, within innovation at HS2, we are a full scope innovation program working with Clive and a number of his colleagues at Southampton, Huddersfield, etc., in order to understand not only the more engineering focused elements of HS2, but also the impact and the human factors of the railway. So we have 4 core focus areas that we're working on. As you can imagine, construction and design at the moment is very pressing as we are starting to build. Environment and the impact not only of the operation but the sites that we are standing up to construct this railway. We want to do a lot more when it comes to emissions and noise. And then process, as you can imagine, it is a huge undertaking of a project of this scale, and we're delivering with our partners real live innovations today. So at one end of our innovation spectrum, we are doing some low TRL level and PhD type study. At the other end of the spectrum, we are commercializing technology on those sites as we speak. And the recent pandemic has proven that we can do that very quickly in terms of getting PPE up and running. But the one that's most pertinent for today is our focus area around customer experience. And we need to not only identify and commercialize those ideas, but we also need to have those available for the broader system. It's no good having a world-leading customer experience on a section of a journey. We have to make those available throughout the entire journey as defined by the customer, not by the boundaries of our program. The experience that we have to offer has to be reliable and robust from the point that you decide to purchase the ticket through to the point you arrive. So I'll move on to the next slide, sort of just describing that a little further, in that we will take into consideration much more than just the period of time that people are spending on the train. We've recently launched our accelerator, looking at digital elements, and we have another cohort going live where we will start to be looking at elements of the customer experience, and things like interfaces for planning and booking your journey are very important to us, because that's an integral part of your decision to travel. The information that you receive during travel, we've identified that sometimes the anxiety comes whilst you're waiting for the train, or whilst you're at the station, or even whilst you're on the train and you're unsure of timings and things, or follow-on travel. The journey to and from the station, we've experienced a major revolution in terms of how people are getting to and from these central hubs of travel, and also how they interconnect between them. So if you have an electric vehicle, you will want to charge it, and that's a very, very different model, especially when you start to get a greater degree of autonomy in cars. How can we start to have a greater degree of intelligence in the way that we access those pieces of major infrastructure, in terms of our transit from our home all the way through to the platform? Railway stations are a huge retail space, and that needs to be appropriate at all times for the customers. And so therefore we're also investigating things like multi-use retail space or dynamic retail space, and at all times evaluating that from a point of accessibility to all, because for too long we've looked at this through a lens of the standard passenger, and we now are starting to take into account the different elements and the diversity of people that we service. And then obviously there's ongoing interconnections. It's if you have a great trip between London and Birmingham, but then after you've reached Birmingham, your ongoing connection is delayed or frustrating in some way, we can't wash our hands at that stage. We need to interface with all of the other areas of transport to make sure those ongoing interconnections are appropriate, and that you receive a standardized level of service throughout. So how do we move from this legacy system mindset and design an infrastructure that is accessible to all? And that's by really taking into consideration the human factors element of a broad demographic of people using our infrastructure, looking at multi-channel options to give information to people about their travel, and to also access information and to get those things in. So it's not just about, for example, we've got a lot of projects on pedestrian eye tracking and wayfinding around a station. Well, that's only one element. That doesn't solve the entire problem. So if you start to look at things like audio queuing, in terms of audio sound signaling about when people, so that people can autonomously get around the station who may have visual impairment. It's also about trying to take into consideration a need for people to have assistance, but not feel that that is an unnecessary obligation. So starting to build regular passenger frameworks where you have a more peer-to-peer approach of helping people in a natural way without individuals feeling an obligation. So all of these things are being discussed and investigated at Innovate at HS2. However, we are very aware that we are building this railway at the moment, and we don't have necessarily a real life test environment, all the expertise in these spaces from an operational background. And that's when we look to the likes of UKRRIN and also our partners who are already operating TOCs. And then the final piece is around planning for that change in the customer of the future. The things that we see today within the customer environment will not be the customer behaviors of the future. Within the last 10 years, average phone use has gone up from half an hour to 90 minutes and to an hour and a half. People are using far more different types of transport and need to charge vehicles, for example. But there's also other things that are unseen to us, like increases in personal debt as the education system becomes more expensive, or an increasing lifespan, but health overall being decreased, and increased anxiety of passengers. The passenger base are also changing their preferences, and so therefore, bearing in mind we are now designing and delivering a railway that in the mid-20s to the early 30s will open. It has a lifespan of 100 years, and we need to constantly be aware of that and understanding the dynamics of those customers so that we can meet those in a proactive rather than reactive. I think that's everything from me. So thank you very much for your time. And if anyone has any questions, please drop them into the chat. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Howard. That was a really interesting presentation. I'm now going to introduce Mike Bradley from the University of Cambridge and Rob Morland from FCP, who are going to introduce our ideas for an inclusive passenger experience centre. So, Rob, would you like to take control?
Okay, thanks very much, Howard, and thanks, Sharon. Okay, so let me just move on, assuming I've got control. Yes, I have. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Following on from Clive's introduction, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the proposed Inclusive Passenger Experience Centre and explain how it's going to fit into the current UKRRIN family. So the existing UKRRIN centres mentioned by Clive have received capital funding under the government's UK RPIF scheme, which is now run by Research England. This provides government funds for infrastructure, and those are matched on a 2-to-1 basis by industry for projects and operations. The initial spending period is 8 years for the UKRRIN network. The UKRRIN centres received 28 million from government, and this has been matched by 64 million from industry, so exceeding the 2-to-1 ratio. As we've heard from Howard, passenger experience is seen as key to developing the railway of the future. Passenger experience is relevant to all the 4 existing UKRRIN centres, but it isn't currently a specific focus for any of them. So the proposed new IPEC is going to collaborate closely with the other centres. It'll work with industry to enable and deliver innovative solutions that improve the experience for everyone who wants to travel by rail. It also has the potential to help the UK take a global lead in understanding and fulfilling passenger needs. So what will the IPEC actually be? Well, we envisage a new physical environment for passenger experience exploration. We hope it will include space for passenger experience mock-ups, some closed areas where projects can take place in a confidential way, some open areas for sharing and for learning, and it'll enable users to explore and evaluate all stages of the end-to-end passenger journey. It'll also provide an accessible hub for passenger groups, for example, Transport Focus, to work with passengers. It'll be available to infrastructure owners, to train builders, operators, regulators, and others, anyone who wants to better understand passengers and how their future needs can be met. So the discussions and consultations we've had so far that were mentioned by Sharon earlier have proposed 4 themes for the IPEC. Inclusive design, passenger digital connectivity, future passenger preferences and demand, and passenger performance metrics. So we'll now have a brief look at each of these just to give you a little bit more of an idea of where our current thinking is. So inclusive design, first of all, is about designing products and services that delight the greatest possible proportion of the population and exclude as few people as possible. So it isn't about a single disability or an impairment, but it seeks to understand the capabilities of real people and help designers and engineers to devise better solutions that lower the barriers for these people when they use the product or service. It's especially helpful in understanding and meeting the needs of the elderly and those who have multiple impairments, for example, combinations of vision, hearing, cognition, reach, stretch, strength and dexterity, as well as mobility. If it's applied effectively to the railway, it'll allow more people to travel and it'll improve the travel experience for everyone. So if we look at inclusive design in terms of a kind of a diagram, the experience that most people have using any product or service can be seen as a continuum from finding it easy to it being so difficult that they can't use it at all, and we then say that they're excluded. The objective for an inclusive design project is first to reduce the number of people who are excluded by lowering barriers that they face. This then reduces the number of people who have difficulty or are frustrated. And that means, of course, that more people will find the experience easy. And so our kind of conclusion is that inclusive design, when it's done well, will grow the market, but it'll also benefit all rail users. And two is passenger digital connectivity. So there's an increasing drive in the rail industry to meet the digital needs of all travellers, from regular users to novices, and even those who currently don't or indeed won't use digital devices at all. Connectivity is no longer just a nice extra, but now it drives decisions about how people travel. So we believe that by better understanding and then satisfying the digital needs of all travellers will increase the chance that they will choose rail over alternatives. And also better connectivity delivered efficiently across the whole rail network will also enable new services that will encourage users and could drive new revenue streams. The third theme is future passenger preferences and demand. So forecasts of passenger demand don't always take factors external to the rail industry fully into consideration. By using expressed passenger preferences to guide decision making, this will help make services more appealing and should in itself grow demand. Also, cultural and demographic trends can lead to changes to preferences over time. And long-term projects such as HS2, which Howard mentioned earlier on, need to take special care to think about possible changes to our society 20 and more years ahead. But there again, COVID has also shown that short-term dislocations can undermine the very best plans. And so a better understanding of passenger preferences can help make interventions like those currently in place less concerning for travellers. The fourth theme is passenger performance metrics. So improving the industry's understanding of what good looks like in terms of accessibility, inclusion and experience. It's an important part of good passenger experience design. And so clear metrics in this area will help designers, specifiers and others understand what's needed to create a railway that considers the needs of all customers. Two examples of projects that have already delivered in this field are shown here. On the left is a figure from the On Time EU project, which developed an innovative quality of service measure that considered multiple factors, including transport space, journey time, connectivity, punctuality, resilience, and passenger comfort. And on the right is a figure which many of you will probably recognise from the RSSB project T1140, which defined a seat comfort metric and a scale which covers factors including legroom, seat compression, hardness and length of journey. And this can be used by train manufacturers and procurers to provide better guidance to their suppliers on the seat comfort factors that matter most to passengers. So hopefully this has given you an idea of our thinking so far, and you'll have an opportunity to add your own suggestions in the workshop later. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague Mike Bradley, who will go into a bit more detail on what the IPEC could do. And we hope that this will act as a further stimulus for you to come up with ideas and begin to show you the value of getting involved in making the IPEC happen. So thanks for your attention. I'll hand over to Mike if you'd like to take control.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Worked. Okay, so
following the event in November that some of you, I think, attended, we've been sort of thinking over the last few months about what could this inclusive passenger experience centre be, and there are a number of ways it could be used. So, kind of the most obvious one is a research centre where it could carry out assessments with real people for proposed designs of train stations and other customer touch points. It could also help develop tools to simulate, predict, and help avoid passenger experience issues before designs are finalised. So that's been some of the bread and butter of the work that we've been doing at the University in Cambridge, trying to develop tools that allow us to avoid problems before we've even designed them in. And also to generate new knowledge, guidance, and standards with this people-first focus. So quantifying population level data, for example, to allow this prediction of exclusionary characteristics in designs. And really one of the emphasis on this part is this idea of real people. It's very easy, certainly in the Cambridge area, to design technology for people who are good at using technology. But actually the real challenge is to design technology and facilities for people who struggle with technology or who struggle with capabilities in some of the other domains. And that's something that we think the IPEC could be very transformative in allowing access to those people, for people in doing research. So what sort of research could it do? Well, things like population capabilities, digital exclusion prediction and assessment methods, so trying to work out how digitally exclusive a particular app is or a ticket machine to make it more usable for everybody and to make it more inclusive. To sort of work further in the area of passenger comfort, in terms of the criteria, quantification, what are the things that matter. But even straying into areas like passenger perceptions of aesthetics, including the use of virtual reality and augmented reality. So clearly with augmented reality, you can very quickly mock up something in CAD and get people to experience it through augmented reality. Things like wayfinding and navigation research, both physical and digital, whether it's using an app or it's just simple kind of static signage or dynamic signage, such as a PIS screen. But also things like quantification and target setting for inclusive passenger experiences. We all know that actually you have to be able to measure something, to be able to manage it. And actually, I think in this space, there's been very little work done around defining passenger experience from a design point of view, other than those for standards. And actually, we want to be able to quantify in a much more nuanced way to enable us to ensure that we're improving as time goes on. And that leads on to whether we can actually sort of start to do a cost-benefit analysis for passenger experience, and then have the more meaningful discussions when push comes to shove. Where should we be spending our money in station design or train design to optimize the passenger experience for the most people? And things like digital delivery platform, device assessments, and obviously development and enhancement of transport standards and policies. So what could this IPEC be? Well, it could also be an experience centre. So one of the ideas is that if you imagine all stakeholders could experience, for example, wheelchair access to platform train interfaces, where the third age suit, which enables young people to experience some of the effects of aging, to try and navigate through a proposed station layout, for example, or through a train. And the idea is that, well, actually you can open it to anybody. So any visitor who wants to come and experience what it's like to have capability loss, that will help develop empathy with people with impairments. And actually, another idea is whether it could contain a cafe to encourage people to visit the centre, to provide a potential pool of participants. So it becomes much more of a sort of externally facing centre, as well as a research centre, which traditionally wouldn't perhaps have such an external face. So it could also be a technology showcase centre, so suppliers could demonstrate their products in an environment which could emulate a rail station, carriage interior, platform train interface, ticket hall, etc. And stakeholders could then use capability loss simulation to help them evaluate technologies from viewpoints other than just their own. and it could facilitate access for real people to evaluate technologies from a non-technologist perspective. So more a classic case of doing a user trial, but with actual real people who are not vested in the technology, and who are not normally the people that would take part in studies like that. And finally, one of the other ideas is that, well, if you're doing all this good work and good research, and there's lots of experiences to be had, well, why wouldn't you want to do some of your design work there at the same time in a co-located space, either in or next to the IPEC, and access the benefits of being close to a university, and also all the facilities within the IPEC. And again, to allow this easy and quick iteration of designs with access to real people. So it's not just about the classic young designer and engineer developing something divorced from the reality, the lived reality of people who will have to actually use the product or service. But also potentially offering a improved continuity of design experience relating to the rail industry. So there is a sort of focus for that to sort of design skill. Okay, well, that's me. I'm going to hand over to Alex now, who has got the joyous job of allowing you to add your contributions to the thoughts that we as a group have had. And this is, I think, the point, Alex, where you guide people over to the mural. Is that correct?
It is, yes. Thank you very much, Mike. And thank you to all the speakers. So I'll do a quick wrap up and then start to navigate us through to the next part of the session. So thank you to Sharon, to Clive, to Howard, to Rob and to Mike for those presentations, for introducing us. My name is Alex Burrows from the University of Birmingham. I'm here to guide you through the workshop, and the first thing we have to do is all head over to Mural. So please do not shut Teams, please keep this call open, but please open up the link to Mural that you will have had in the joining instructions, and I will keep talking, so hopefully you will hear me, but you will have in front of you the Mural, what do we call this? The workspace. So if I could ask, perhaps, Sharon, could you give me a shout as to how many people you can see coming over?
I can see lots of people coming over.
Fantastic. This is good news.
People are making their way over, yeah.
Right, so to everyone coming through, please don't break anything. What we're going to do first of all is I'm going to invite, in a minute or so, I'm going to invite Chris to give us a talk through a small icebreaker exercise to get us started, and then I'm going to talk through what you can see here on the mural, and then we're going to start doing post-its in this virtual environment, which should be fantastic. So while you're all coming across and having a play, it's always good to see, of course, what visiting name you've got. So I'm visiting Squid on this, which is very exciting. What I should say is that your post-its from here will be used to feed into our design and development of this new UKRRIN Centre of Excellence. And a number of you may remember a similar exercise we did 3 or 4 years ago when we established the first phase of UKRRIN and the existing Centres of Excellence, and how we took industry soundings and input to design and develop what the Centres of Excellence should look like, what the requirements would be from industry, so that we got the commitment, which we successfully achieved, and we had the industry buy-in and ultimately the collaborative activity being undertaken, which is fantastic. And so it's a repeat of that exercise from about 3 years ago, I think it was. So, one other thing I should say, please do, if you have any questions on either this, the operation of this in the here and now, or some clarity of understanding, please do ask questions on the chat function. We've got people, I think Naila's going to be collating those questions, and will fire them through to me as we go through the next half an hour, and I or Clive or others will try and answer those in real time while you're all messing about doing post-it notes, which I can see you're doing, which is fantastic. So perhaps I should say, I should hand over to Chris now to take us through this icebreaker exercise, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Chris Shipton, and I've been helping the team here with some illustrations which you can hopefully see in Mural. So what this is basically a way of doing a post-it note session virtually. And the crucial thing is to know how to make a post-it note in Mural. And I noticed somebody's discovered that with a really, really massive post-it note. So just in case you don't know, you should see a grey bar with a load of buttons on the corner of your screen. And one of those has a tab on it saying text. And if you click on that, it should open up a sidebar. In that sidebar, you should see options for sticky notes of various sizes. And you can do several things. You can click on it and it will put a note onto the page, or you can simply drag it onto the page. When you put your sticky note on the page, you can click on it and then write inside it. So that's what we want to see people doing. Now, when it comes to navigating around the page, you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of your browser screen, which is open on Mural, there is something called zoom settings, and it will allow you to zoom in and out of the picture. So we're kind of looking for smaller post-it notes, so you can zoom right in and start putting your post-it notes down. And finally, when it comes to moving around the page, you can press the space bar and simply turn your cursor into a little hand, and that'll allow you to move around the page. So equipped with the zoom function, space bar and click to move yourself around, and the ability to do post-it notes, we should be able to do the icebreaker. So in the physical world, you know, a sort of traditional event, often what I might do is organize a low-tech social network. And what we do is we get people to write their name and something about them on the post-it note and upload it to a piece of paper. And that way we create a post-it note based version of Facebook. So being extremely meta, we're now going to do a virtual analog digital social network. So what I'd like you to do is just by way of testing out technology and getting familiar with the post-it notes, because we're going to be asking you to do some very serious post-it notes in a minute about feedback on the image. All we really want is your name, your social media handle, and your favorite train, and to stick it on a post-it note and to place it in position on the canvas. And I think a lot of people have done this already. Everyone's read it. And then if you see anyone else you know, you may move your post-it note near them to try and create some sort of little social clusters within the page. So I think this is the most amount of people ever seen in Mural. Usually use a workshop about 10 people. We've got about 48 in, which I think is fantastic in the screenshots actually. So yeah, I think most people seem to have got to grips with it. If you're having an issue, put a query into Teams chat. Otherwise, I think it's time to hand back to Alex for the rest of the show.
Thank you, Chris. We should get some further narrative as to how this is panning out. I mean, this could turn into a bloodbath. This could also be extremely entertaining. Can we make sure we log what people have put as their favourite trains so that we can use this as leverage at a later date? Oh, we've got a question I can see. The 3 things we should put on the post-it: your name, your social media handle, so your Twitter handle, if you have a Twitter handle, or Insta, or whatever. And the 3rd thing was your favourite train. And for those of you who may not have heard, my wife in the background snorting with laughter, making lots of people put their favourite train on there. She'll kill me for that later. And then you should put it. You should move your post-it into a cluster, to create a cluster with someone you know. I think that's the only question I can see so far. So it looks like everyone's got this. Can I just ask, just to pick on people, has Clive Roberts, Clive, if you put oh, I can see his up there, yes. Oh, honestly.
Oh, we've got an actual picture of an actual train. That's nice.
Oh, that's impressive.
Somebody's gone for advanced level use.
I'm liking whoever that is. Isn't that the is that like Lenin's train or something? I think it is. Is it Lenin's train or Stalin's train? It's
no, it's the train with the nuclear bomb on from the James Bond film.
Oh, that's Howard Mitchell. I recognise that voice. Oh, I quite like the story of it being Lenin's train. Never mind. Yeah, I thought I recognised it from somewhere.
I should also note that the social media handle isn't compulsory, especially if you don't want to share your private Twitter feed or anything. It's just if you've got a social media feed that you're happy to share with others in a bid to get more followers, but it's totally not compulsory.
Good. So recognizing time, and while this is great fun, people, we do have work to do. So what I'd like to do would be to just talk you through this workboard. So to the top right, you'll see a fantastic picture which I think sets out really nicely an awful lot of information around the background to this. So if you look, it's a number of boxes. You can see along the top 5 boxes that are setting out current trends that may reflect upon what we're looking at when it comes to a passenger experience centre, what it might need to achieve, what it needs to consider in terms of what the landscape looks like. And then in the centre on the left-hand side, visiting sea turtle, visiting snail, I can see, and Clive Roberts, the visiting squid, are all close by. You'll see 4 dark boxes with an arrow pointing to the right. These are the 4 themes of the proposed themes for the UKRRIN Centre of Excellence. So inclusive design, passenger performance metrics, future demand and preferences, and passenger digital connectivity, which Rob talked us through just now. And again, we can talk about those in a bit more detail over the next half an hour while people are considering their post-its. Just next to that is a really cool image of what sort of facilities we might want to think about as well. What sort of actual practical facilities do we need to consider are going to be relevant to a passenger experience centre? Of course, you can see there a mock-up of a train platform interface. You can see third age suite, programmable platform, test train interior are all incorporated there. And then just below that, you can see the stages of the passenger journey, which is, thank you to HS2, is based on all of the component parts. So compartmentalizing was the journey from the planning and consideration all the way through to the door-to-door to getting to your final destination as well. And how does passenger experience, when we consider passenger experience and research into that, how do we consider all of those different stages and different elements that come into play, and with different impacts, different role to play in the passenger experience? And then at the bottom there, you can see where some post-its seem to be appearing. You can see some challenges that the industry faces, that we face operationally when we consider passenger experience, and things like decarbonisation, of course, of dwell time. Of very tactful, there's wider people, thank you. Personalization, complete door-to-door, I can't see that bit, let's just see, complete door-to-door experience, and passenger stress as well. So those should give you some ideas as to what challenges we want to look at addressing within that research. And then on the right hand side, you can see how it fits into the network. So our 5 centres of excellence that Clive mentioned. So IPEC, the Inclusive Passenger Experience Centre, sitting alongside the existing centres in infrastructure, rolling stock, digital systems and testing. And then at the bottom, a box around UKRRIN activities as well, so around inclusive design, around it being more than PRM. Again, a lot of these points that both Mike and Rob made earlier as well. So what this drawing hopefully gives you is an awful lot of inspiration as to the kind of questions we're asking, and for the sort of feedback we're looking for from industry. And to take that to its next step, of course, you'll see at the bottom right, you will see a set of orange discs which give you really the chunks of feedback we'd like to see. So into 4 sections. So first of all, what is the current state of inclusive passenger experience? You don't have to do anything yet, so I'm just talking you through everything you can see so far. So what is the current state of inclusive passenger experience? And that might consider, for example, those challenges, those trends we talked about earlier. And feeding into number 2, which is what are the big challenges? And by that, you can consider the pain points that the passenger faces, but also the sorts of challenge that operators and the supply industry face as well. What are the barriers? What are the big things we need to fix that come out of that first question? So by implication, when we consider what is the current state, with number 2, it's, well, what do we actually need to address? What do the client bodies like HS2 want to see the supply industry develop and deliver in the future? And therefore, what is going to be the role of this type of centre of excellence in passenger experience, and what should it be focusing on in order to enable the rail supply industry to address those big challenges? Then number 3, what are the enablers? What are the things that the centre of excellence needs to focus on in order to help deliver the answers to these challenges? And I see number 4 is optional. I don't think it should be optional. I think it would be quite a useful thing to actually consider. What would success look like in the future? What will IPEC have done for you? What will UKRRIN, this Centre of Excellence in UKRRIN have delivered that will ultimately help you win the contracts, develop the product solutions that you can bring to market successfully and enjoy success on the back of that? Those are the 4 key areas. Please, anyone, shout if there are any questions or anything I have missed. But what we'd like to do now would be for everyone on this call to get their to collect some post-it notes and to start to put down their thoughts under each of these discs with their answers to these this request for feedback. So it really is quite simple. Imagine if we were doing this face to face, you'd be marching around the room. There'd be all hell to pay. People be grabbing post-its and pens and flying at certain parts. You know, sadly, we can't have that physical interaction, so it's all being done on a screen, and I'm getting quite dizzy following the names spinning round. But if you could collect up some post-its and put some feedback down under those 4 discs, I'm going to stop talking for a bit and see how this pans out. So let's go. We should have some music at this point, really, shouldn't we?
I was going to say I could play the music from today's virtual graduation ceremony to you, which we had.
Do we actually want that, Clive, though, or would that be?
It's quite nice.
We do have a question actually from Neil Connor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm struggling to get my. I can see I can get a sticky. So I did think it should be the Vision On is what you should be playing in terms of music, but that's another matter. How do I get my handle or name onto this thing to make it work? So when I put my note up, you know who it is. Just out of interest, I'm struggling with that.
Good. Chris?
Are you okay? Have you?
I'm in it.
Yeah. Have you found the sticky?
Yeah.
Navigation bar, excellent. And
so I can drag that onto it, but it doesn't seem to put my name against it. Am I? Everybody else has got a name and sea turtles and all this sort of stuff.
The stickies themselves are sort of anonymized, essentially. They're not sort of tagged name. But
so don't worry about it then.
Double click on it and you can write whatever you need to write in it.
Okay, don't worry about it. That's what you tell me.
And I think you can see everybody else's name, but not your own, because
yeah. I was just feeling very lonely and undernamed, basically.
Not sure what animal you were in the workspace. But yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'll get on with it then. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Okay, this seems to be working. This is fantastic. Without the scrum that you'd have in a meeting room. So I would say a particular advantage of this system is that we're going to leave this open afterwards as well. So there will be an opportunity, if you consider, you don't have to get everything down now. If you have an idea that comes to you in the next few days, you will be able to come back here and pop it on. So we will be leaving this open for a week, I believe, in order to allow people to share any further thoughts that they may have on this. I'm just seeing that it looks like we're getting some good notes in. That's a good point, Naylor. Yes, you can zoom in. There is on Mural, just over on the lower right section of your screen, there should be a zoom bar that will allow you to zoom in and out, so you can see more clearly what's on the post-its. Although they do look very small if you're zoomed out, when you zoom right in, you can see the detail, and we can certainly afterwards we can pull off the information. Whatever size it is. So don't worry about that.
And Chris, can I just ask a navigation question that's come up through the chat as well? Someone who's using a touchpad, can they just zoom in with 2 fingers? What's the best thing to do?
I'm using a touchpad too. Yeah, I think it's a bit, the touchpad 2 fingers seems to move you around. So I think zooming in is best handled if you're on a touchpad, if you use the little right-hand navigation pane. So there's a little plus and a minus above it on the right-hand side of your screen.
Bottom right corner.
Yeah. I think we're definitely pushing Mural to its absolute limits. Somebody in the Mural headquarters is going to be wondering what on earth is going on.
Well, it's your name in the frame, isn't it, Chris? Actually,
yes,
so
yes, all my fault.
You'll be getting the stern call later.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like I haven't got any more questions immediately, so it looks like this is developing nicely, and we're certainly seeing a number of points getting put down, which is fantastic. Yeah, so someone's put the killer point on number 2. Will passengers return to the rail en masse? And that's a huge live issue, isn't it, for the railway with the challenge, what with coronavirus and thereafter. We've got joining up operators, access to data. Thank you. Yes, that's something we're certainly very aware, considering a lot in Birmingham at the moment. I'm sure we're not the only ones in that regard. This is fantastic. What I'm really liking is the number of post-its getting filled up quickly all in one go, which is very cool. So on the enablers, there's some really good enablers as well. Again, data support from the wider industry. Really, and what I'm going to do actually afterwards is I'm going to ask for a few people. They know who they are, so I won't name them now. To give a quick summary of their reflections on what they've seen from this. I mean, some immediate reflections, but we will go away and look at this thoroughly.
Thanks everybody for your contributions on the inclusive passenger experience area. There's some really good points there. I like those. Please continue putting those on. They're very helpful.
Excellent job, everybody, in my opinion, having done this with lots of different industries. It's great to see everyone taking to it so well.
So that's the rail industry, you see. We're on the case with these things.
I think the joined up points that Howard was making about the whole journey, really, which HS2 is clearly thinking very hard about, how they can control the ends of the journey, or how they can influence the ends of the journey over which we don't have any direct control. I think that's an interesting point, and I see there's some post-its on that here as well.
says Rob, while I've got you, I was just looking at the fourth disc, actually, the measures of success, and I'm really intrigued, and I just wanted to ask, well, raise a couple of them, but then ask you a question. So I like the point someone's made, be a home, be a melting pot. I particularly like that, and I like all the other comments that have been put on there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask whether is this a centre, I'm recognising it's in a university and it's going to collaboration with industry, but is this a way almost, could this be a means of almost providing a forum for passengers to be able to have their say, so a two-way conversation, so that we can actually provide that end user input and challenge and engagement with what we're offering as an industry?
Yes, absolutely. And in both the points that Mike and I made, I think we're really keen to engage with real passengers, and we'd very much like Transport Focus to take a lead role in that, because obviously they have relationships with many passengers in their various forums. I don't know whether there's anyone from Transport Focus on the webinar, but we have had various discussions with them in the past, and I think we'd like to engage with them very much in bringing some of their people in and hearing their voices, because it's the authentic voice of the passenger that is really powerful in helping us to think about what passengers really think of our railway.
Thank you. That's really exciting. I'm just looking at number 3 around the enablers. There's certainly a number of people have mentioned the data, a number of people mentioned on the inclusivity side. Is there an element almost of is there more we can bring out from within? When I say deep within industry, I suppose I mean from smaller companies we don't normally hear from, or parts of the larger companies where perhaps we don't get the multitude of voices able to come out and engage more directly. Is there a way that we could develop the centre to create the space for more voices and a wider input, because perhaps we don't have the breadth of views that perhaps we might like in order to get that?
Well, I know there are quite a few SMEs on the webinar, but perhaps you or Clive know better than I do. How do you help SMEs to engage with UKRRIN at the moment? You do have some special mechanisms, don't you?
We do. Well, we have. And certainly on one thing we have is the Rail Alliance, which is essentially a rail cluster, an SME community with I think about 750 members. Which is part of my team at Birmingham, and which gives us a major reach into the SME community. But obviously there are far more than 750 SMEs in the UK alone with an interest in rail, or with some kind of relevance to rail, or adjacent industries that could translate into rail. And I suppose that's where I think I'm pretty sure we've got RIR on the line as well, and it might be worth bringing. I think David and Richard might be on. Are either of you?
Yeah, I'm online, Alex. Yeah.
Thanks, David. David Clark, who's technical director at RIR. It might be worth bringing you in on this discussion, actually, around how do we bring in a broader range of voices to these centres, and certainly how have you found the last year or two so far with UKRRIN in achieving that?
Well, we've been trying to help do that through our Unlocking Innovation events, which we partner with. So obviously, a way we could do it, as you guys would with Rail Alliance, is we could organise outreach events on this particular theme. The other obvious thing is that what we've been doing with those events is taking them to the facilities, and clearly this is going to be an attractive facility. But I think the wider point is what's the business proposition for an SME to get involved? How does it work? So, in the why, I'm assuming we'd start with the same principles as the rest of UKRRIN. You could join as a member, or you could use it on a pay-as-you-go basis. And I don't know whether you'd agree with me or not, but I think we've still got some way to go to really get people through the door. I mean, when your new building opens later this year, then that'll be a real step in the right direction. But we've got to get our people on the premises, I think, for them to really see see what's on offer and see how they can engage with it.
I think that's a fair point. Yes, thank you, David. Sorry to put you on the spot like that as well.
Alex, does UKRRIN have any relationship with the Rail Innovation Group? Because they of course have quite a lot of SMEs as members, and quite a number of those companies I know are active in the whole sort of customer experience and passenger experience area.
I believe it's probably going to be through RIA, because I think,
right,
David,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, Milda is closely involved with Rail Innovation Group, isn't she?
She has been. She less so now because we're keeping her so busy. But we've hosted Rail Innovation Group meetings before. But I think you're quite right, Rob, that this is a space that would be very interesting to their members. I mean, likewise, as Alex says, there's we've got 60% of our members are SMEs. You've got 700 odd on your. So 60% of our 300 are SMEs. You've got 700 odd. We've got well over 1,000 on the Unlocking Innovation list. So we've got lots of ability through all of the various channels to reach out, and we could, you could then go to Rail Forum Midlands. So Rail Alliance, Birmingham, ourselves, and Rail Forum Midlands have brought things together in what we call the innovation family, Rail Innovation Family, to try and be able to reach out in a more coherent way. So I think collectively we could certainly help any new centre make its presence known.
And I think that was a good point about your new building, Alex. I guess that will be much more easy and much more accessible than your existing facility in terms of having space for people to come in and participate and engage, I guess.
Yes, very much so, very much so. Maybe I might bring Clive in at this point. Clive, do you want to say a few words on our new building and what your plans are specifically from a research perspective?
Yes, so for those that don't know, as part of UKRRIN, and has been pointed out earlier, we've created the Centre of Excellence in Digital Systems. The idea of that is to focus particularly on the digital aspects, which covers some of the data issues that we've talked about here. And as I said earlier, the idea of what we're talking about here is to extend and work closely with this group to do that. So as part of the digital centre, we've got a building under construction. It's 3,000 square meters, and it's the idea of that is for it to be a collaborative space where academia and industry can work together on collaborative projects around digital systems for rail, have some significant testing facilities there. So, for example, we will have mock-up control rooms. We've got drivers, cabs. There'll be physical assets of the railways that can be tested and used in a simulated environment, or but in an environment that's much more like a virtual test environment than we perhaps have at the moment. And the bonus of that is, and I think the same thing falls true here, is that by being able to bring academia and industry together to work, we can make these ideas accelerate a bit more, but also we can provide facilities where things can actually be tested in an appropriate way before they're applied on the real world.
Pizza and beer may be important as well, I guess.
Pizza and beer are always important, Rob, so yes.
Clive, so it's Richard Jones from RIA, David's colleague. If I can just build on that, all of that is absolutely fantastic, and it's a brilliant achievement in only 2 years from the whole of UKRRIN, and particularly from what Birmingham have achieved. In the end, though, what will move things through to the market is a motivation. So it's either pull from an end customer, somebody really needs something, or possibly push from a business organisation that's got a lot of money behind them to create something that didn't exist before, and which the customer didn't even know they wanted.
Yep.
And if we go down the pull function, then there's got to be some funding. So those are utterly key factors. Otherwise, we're doing interesting stuff, but it's not going anywhere. Yeah,
for sure. I think in the digital space, certainly already within the UKRRIN Digital Centre, we've had 2 spin-outs, which are collaborations between the university and our industrial partners, and they're getting products, or just beginning to get products out there. So within 2 years, that's quite an amazing feat, and we see there's a pipeline of activity in that area. And then there's collaborative projects, and that's really the thing that I think differentiates what we've been able to do in UKRRIN. Historically, we've done lots of very good research, but industry sort of looked at us and said, "Oh, that looks interesting," but there hasn't been that collaboration, that engagement where we're working together. If we think about some of the work that we've done under the UKRRIN banner, for example, the things on hydrogen trains, where it very much is a collaborative team with industry and academia working together on a day-to-day basis, what we've been able to do is really accelerate things from things which were, you know, quite theoretical, first of a kind, through to stuff that's being tested out on the railway in a very, very short space of time, you know, in months and maybe a year rather than in decades, which is perhaps where we have conventionally been. And so the order of magnitude in terms of development time, I think we can really address, and there's a hunger to do that. We are in a position where there is significant amounts of industry hunger for innovation, to differentiate, and it's worth bringing in the point of the international space in which we work, because, for example, we at Birmingham, we have a framework with Indian Railways. We're just developing one with Brazil. I mentioned that SMRT are actually one of the biggest investors in UKRRIN. They're doing that because they want to work with UK industries and the things that we do here to take that forward. So yes, we obviously want to be working with HS2 and Network Rail and all of our local partners, but there is actually an international audience for that as well, which we can capture.
Yeah, I think, you know, because RIA has an interest in exports as well, and we've certainly realised that how we're going to build export markets in our brave new world after the 1st of January is by collaborative R&D in those markets. That's how we'll drive British industry's exports in years to come. Requires some forward thinking, but great to hear that you're doing it.
I think, Richard, responding to your point on, you know, how do we pull this through, the most valuable thing we can do is to stimulate buyers to start specifying passenger experience in their requirements for bids. And obviously HS2 has really taken a lead here. I think they're probably the first kind of major railway undertaking that has put inclusive design and passenger experience right at the heart of what it's doing in building its railway, and that's incredibly valuable. And I think that helps to bring things through, because people supplying HS2 have got to have something to say on passenger experience, and that will help to monetize some of these ideas, I think.
It's certainly good to hear that you understand what the railway is actually for.
Yes, we did have a quote which we used just to stimulate people to think about it, that the railway, we felt, tends to consider passengers as an argumentative form of freight often. So.
Years ago, I used to work in the sort of early days of computing, and everybody involved used to agree that computers are brilliant things if it wasn't for software and users.
I think a lot of people can have sympathy with that. We're doing well here, and we're going to in about 5 minutes' time, we're going to pause. So I'm going to ask Clive to come back and say a few words. Just a couple of points. I know that a number of people experience some lag. Chris has pointed out that this is we are stretching Mural here with the number of users on, so perhaps there's a good analogy there with our current railway infrastructure, perhaps. So we're creaking at the seams, but we're ploughing on, and we're getting there, and it's good. This will remain open afterwards, so don't panic if you can't get all of your feedback in the next 10 minutes, that you've lost any further opportunity. That's not the case. This will be open, and we are, of course, always contactable as this work develops over the coming weeks and months. Have we had any other questions, Naila, that I could answer, or are we okay?
Okay for now, but it's a good reminder to people whilst they've been sticking. Anything else they want to ask about this or UKRRIN in general?
Great. So yeah, so just use a.
There's a comment in the chat about how it's easier to build from scratch, and we have a challenge retrofitting into our current Victorian facilities, but also a comment that it's not an excuse. And I guess it highlights the fact that for new builds, we've had a presentation from HS2, there's a great opportunity, but it's also the challenge of you're building it for today for 50, 100 plus years. So
there's still that challenge, and I think that's the importance of the work stream about looking at the future and understanding, based on trends and information, what the passenger of the future could potentially look like.
I think that's a very good point, and actually, certainly in my view, we're very fortunate in the UK in that we have TfL and the Underground, and I think they're a very good example of how much you can do with really very old infrastructure, and I think they've done remarkable things on passenger experience. Clearly, one of the problems is that it can be quite expensive doing that on old infrastructure, in particular if it has various protections associated with it. But I think TfL are a great example of how you can make those things work. And of course, in the last few years, perhaps stimulated by John Betjeman, we've had some fabulous transformations of some of our older structures. But yes, they can't be done without a lot of money, and that can be a big challenge. So.
It certainly can. As someone who goes through Birmingham New Street often, it's expensive just fixing stuff that isn't even relatively that old. But standing over 6 foot tall, there are some things London Underground just cannot fix, unfortunately. And me cracking my head on various things on trains, particularly the Bakerloo line, is unfortunate. Although I understand Glasgow subway is even smaller, but I've not been on the Glasgow subway, so I can't speak from experience in that regard.
Don't stand near the door of Glasgow subway, Alex, because you get your head cut off by the doors.
Oh gosh!
Right. It's easy to spot the people who are not Glaswegians. They're not standing in a line right down the middle of the car.
Right. Good local knowledge there. Thank you.
We've got another comment, Alex, from or 2 comments. One from Dan Taylor in the chat.
Right, Dan Taylor, fantastic. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back down again. Is Dan Taylor our transport focus person?
I am.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm just reading your comment. I think building in user experience to specs is key. Talk suppliers suggest that people writing specs don't know what can be delivered. So that's a really interesting point, isn't it? And I might actually ask if David Clark's still on the line, around the detail, the specifications, what you consider in specification, certainly looking at outcome focused specification, which is something we certainly discussed and looked into at the time of developing the rail sector deal. David, do you want to comment on that at all? Maybe we've lost David, unfortunately. But I certainly agree with that. There is something we do need to consider, is focusing more on what is the outcome we're looking to achieve, rather than setting out in great detail early on, setting out a specification that really doesn't allow the space to innovate or to personalize or to reflect on alternative solutions.
Well, yes, and perhaps if David is able to come in, I can offer a point there. I think one of the challenges with the competitive situation on bidding, for example, for rolling stock contracts, is that the bidding companies know that if they're to stand any chance of winning the contract, they have to be compliant, but almost nothing more. And so if there isn't a specific requirement in the tender for inclusivity or certain measures or compliance with anything more than PRM, which of course is a legal requirement, people simply won't put it in. So it does need to start from where people are writing their requirements down. So Dan, I think you're absolutely right there, and we'd be very keen to work with you as we move forward the concept to bring in the voice of the customers that you corral anyway. So,
and I'm intrigued. We've got a couple of. Sorry, who was that?
Oh, sorry, I was just saying, I think we'd be happy to help.
Oh, brilliant. Good. Thank you.
Very good.
I was just going to, before I hand over, we're going to come back to Clive in a second. I just want to raise a couple of things. Benting, can we take inspiration for the centre of the MIT Media Lab? I think I'm going to have to look that one up. And likewise from Mike Lloyd, who mentioned Stanford Research Institute. I'm going to guess they're both very impressive facilities, are they?
Yes, we probably don't have quite that amount of money yet, but we're getting there. I'm looking forward to seeing your facility, and we'd certainly like to do as much as we can, but we've got to be careful with the pennies, of course.
I think Clive may not let me see the MIT Media Lab in case it gives me ideas of how we can do even more. So. Ah, there we are. Ben's popped some detail in. Fantastic. Oh, it's. I think this is what our academics would call, yes, the multidisciplinary approach to things. Is that right, Clive? Ah, the link. Here we go. You can tell he's trying to cause trouble by showing it to me, can't you? So, can I bring in Naylor and Sharon? Naylor and Sharon, are we okay now to... Oh, what's happened? All the post-its fallen off, or did I just do something on Mural? Did we want to get any reflections from, was it Sid or Chen? Did you want to say a few words on any reflections you've seen from the post-it so far, or from Mike for that matter?
If you don't mind, Alex, I might give a couple of words as well. Dim here.
Oh, sorry, Dim. The last I read, you were struggling to be connected.
Yeah, I had some slight connection issues, as you can imagine, but no, we managed to struggle through it. So I'll pick up a couple of points that the guys were able to pick up. Obviously, just general comment. I think that was a really strong session. We got some really interesting feedback from what we were seeing, and it was really good usership as well. So really positive. I mean, I'll just quickly go through. I know we're struggling for time in general, but in terms of just going through some of the feedback sections. What is the current state of inclusive passenger experience? We got some good feedback, and the perception is that it seems like a low priority and low response at the moment. People are only thinking about it at the later stages, and that feeds into some of the comments that were made earlier about, you know, the feasibility about retrofitting, etc., and being able to include this view and look at inclusivity through an inclusivity lens at the early stages of projects and linking to tenders, etc., and specifications. So I think that's a really important point. What are the big challenges? An uncertain future. And I think there's a couple of references to COVID, understandably, and what impact that will have on us as an industry going forward, and also in terms of the full spectrum of abilities that are using the railway at the moment. So, and I think there were some comments around having flexible designs to adapt to the future, which I think is a really good point. It's particularly from where I'm coming from in terms of rolling stock design. It's an important point to make in terms of adaptability. What are the enablers? In terms of a highlight was picked out in terms of data availability, wider industry and outside of the industry involvement, shared knowledge, obviously clearly an important factor, quantifying exclusivity. So this is some of the work that Cambridge have been doing that Mike touched on earlier in terms of the quantification of exclusivity and how that can be done to provide metrics going forward. And then in the future, what will IPEC have done for you? So we picked up a couple of things in terms of inspiring better design, upskilling of knowledge, raising awareness of what the inclusive passenger experience is, the build once and deploy many times philosophy, and we had some comments about but be a home and a melting pot. So that touches on some of the original comments made in terms of the concept for the IPEC, that melting pot and that environment that is going to be encouraging innovation and looking at railway design through the inclusivity lens. So yeah, I think that was some of the ones that we picked up. I'm sure there were plenty more, but yeah, I'll hand back to you now, Alex, if you want to push on with the rest.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Jim. That's much appreciated. And we've had a lot of good feedback. Right. So I'm done. I'm actually now going to hand over to Clive, who has taken control to wrap up this session. So thank you very much, everyone. Clive.
Yes. So let me also say thank you to everyone. I'm amazed how many post-it notes we've managed to stick on that chart. This is quite a creative way of doing this. Thank you. So I really just want to talk about really the next steps things move forward from this. Today, what we're doing is thinking about how we shape. We obviously had some initial ideas around how Centre of Excellence might be developed, but what we're really keen is to make sure we emphasise the things that respond to your ideas, align with where we have capabilities. We went for a similar exercise for the other existing Centres of Excellence during their development, and we found it really useful to make sure that we'd got the right sort of themes. We put the emphasis and we put the facility investment in the right places. So that today's been very much about that. Over the next few months, what we were wanting to do is to develop a fuller proposal to Research England for funding around this space. That takes some time. It's a moderately long process. It's certainly months into nearly a year, maybe, in terms of how we go through that pipeline. But we have already started some initial dialogue. Research England, the funders that might fund something like this, and we need to develop that further with the feedback from today. But in parallel with that, we need to understand the level of industry buy-in and who's interested in coming with it on this journey with us. Some of you on the call have already been involved in UKRRIN, so you sort of understand the mechanism, and what we would be proposing here is the same. Others of you might be new to our grouping, and what we'll be doing is to reaching out to you and really just trying to gauge your interest. And there's obviously people on the call here that we think might be that might be interested, so we'll follow up with those. There's people that aren't on the call that we think might be key stakeholder groups that we'll follow up as well. So by the time we get to early next year, we anticipate we'll be submitting a proposal to government to be able to take this forward, and it will be our presentation of this that's around themes, around the centre objectives, a number of industry partners that will want to come on that journey with us, and then we'll broaden, once we've got the industry partners, perhaps out to some more academic institutions. There are certainly areas that I know, institutes that work very well in this area, that we would like to look to joining into this grouping, but it's key for us to get the foundations and the key parts right before we focus on how we extend things. So as has been said, what we are looking for is some more is continued ideas. So the mural site will be available for some time, so please add to it. Please don't subtract from it. Please add to it over the next few days. We're really keen to invite people to partner with our existing UKRRIN capability, but particularly in this new opportunity and venture. And we're very keen we're on the start of this journey, so we're really keen to make sure that we move forward together as an academic industry collaboration, which is really at the heart of what we're doing for UKRRIN. So thank you very much again. Just a reminder, the slides and the recording will be available on the UKRRIN site. The mural space will be open for a little while, so please add some different ideas to there. If you're interested in being involved in this journey with us, if you're wanting to find out a bit more about UKRRIN or about the opportunities through the centre here, then please feel free to contact me or the UKRRIN mailbox at RSSB. We'll be very keen to hear from you. So thank you again. I saw there was a few tweets, so if you haven't been following Twitter while we've been speaking, have a little look at the hashtags and things, and you'll find us. Thank you very much, everyone.